And I remember this from personal experience. When you originally get diagnosed with SIBO, you think that that is your root cause.
Totally.
That's a huge misconception and something that's really easy to fall into because, you know, you've had these issues for a while and you might have your GI doc or some other practitioner being like, this is it. Like, this is the problem. We just need to take care of this and then you'll be good. And I feel that that's very simplistic. Yes, SIBO definitely drives symptoms, makes things worse, but it's so critical to dig deeper as to what's driving the dysfunction, what's creating the SIBO. SIBO develops because there's the environment in the gut has to be right for SIBO to develop.
You know, SIBO, I would say that SIBO is presented as the answer. And I think SIBO can be the answer to why you've had X, Y, and Z for so long, but it's not a root cause in the sense that, like, on some random Tuesday in 2014, your intestines didn't just say, you know, it would be great, too many bacteria in the small bowel. Let's do that. Let's make it happen. Some check and balance system had to fall by the wayside that then things started to get weird. And now you're off to the races and you have SIBO. So it's not like it just happens for no reason. And trying to understand those reasons for the individual can be really critical to make sure that you don't relapse and make sure that you actually treat the dang thing in the first place.
As to what your root cause is, usually there's multiple things interacting. So usually there's root causes, not just like one root cause. And I think that's why a lot of practitioners don't really go down that rabbit hole or just don't really approach it. It's because it does get complex and it's hard to maneuver, but it's where you're going to get the most long-term progress is if you can drill down, really understand your root causes and address them in a thorough manner. And that way you're getting out of the very vicious cycle of like, well, I'm going to clear this SIBO and then it comes back and then you keep clearing it. Just a really frustrating place to be, I think.
If it was and I'll kind of use this a little bit facetiously, but if somebody had a simple case of SIBO where, honest to God, the only thing going on with them is the overgrowth of the small intestine, those are the people who already went to the GI doctor, they got rifaximin, it cured them, and now they're like, woo, I can eat anything, and they like live their life. It's the people who come to see us who are like, I've been on 8 gazillion rounds of rifaximin and it hasn't worked. Or I've done 8 gazillion rounds of berberine or neem. It hasn't worked. It keeps coming back. What do I do? And they've had it up to here and then they find people like us. And we're probably one of the first, if not the first people, oftentimes to address the idea of, well, why did you get SIBO?
It's interesting what you're saying too about those cases that are quick and like, you know, cases we don't see ever are the cases where people, you know, do treat and then they're fine. I would probably think still there was some sort of dysfunction that led to the overgrowth and maybe that resolved. Maybe they got diagnosed with Hashimoto's or something or thyroid issues, treated that, and then found out they had SIBO and kind of cleared the SIBO and things went back to normal. Or, you know, maybe they had a period of really high stress and that might have created the SIBO, but then it resolved. Like, I still think there's root causes there, but they've probably resolved in order to have such high efficacy with the rifaximin.
Yeah. And it's important to acknowledge too, and this is kind of like a functional medicine point that I make with a lot of my patients. Oftentimes when people talk about the root causes, so they're thinking, you know, I was normal, quote unquote, and then one day I was not normal. And for some people, it's like, I got food poisoning and ever since my gut has been weird. Or I had this round of antibiotics and ever since my gut has been weird. So oftentimes when we talk about root causes in like the, you know, internet blogger spheric realm, that is a root cause. Like the trigger, the thing that actually dumped you over the edge into dysfunction, that is a root cause, but it's one flavor. You've got the triggering event that actually shoved you off the edge of the metaphorical cliff. But then there's also the things that like nudged you closer to the edge of the cliff to begin with. Or if you're
Yeah.
already dangling off of the edge of a metaphorical cliff and you're already in a dysfunctional state, it's going to make it much harder for you to progress and heal. So, like, those are the cases I see where people are like, but my stress didn't cause the SIBO, the whatever did. And I'm like, yeah, but if you're stressed up to here and your gut brain axis is fried, you're going to have a hard time healing and getting your tissues to work appropriately. So it might not be that stress caused the SIBO in the sense that stress isn't a trigger for the original SIBO, but it can keep you stuck in a rut and keep you from healing. And in that case, something like stress can be a root cause, even if you don't think it was the actual triggering event, right? Like there's kind of two
Yeah.
different types of root causes too.
No, you're 100% correct. I think I mean, I'm often working on people's cases where I'm like, "Oh, that's a big notable thing right
Yeah.
here," but like they're not paying attention to it as something that they think could have been a factor in their case. I kind of
Yeah.
view it as a very perfect storm type
Yeah.
scenario. So you get a perfect blend of maybe a lower fiber diet for a period of time, maybe some antibiotics mixed in, maybe, you have periods of stress blipping up, and then maybe again you have a food poisoning event that just kind of sets things off.
Hmm.
I mean, I think it's always like a weird concoction of different things at play. It's not usually just this one clear cut thing. As you're saying, it's like this gradual buildup, and sometimes it's very subtle,
Yeah.
but some of the subtle things can be huge factors.
Yeah. What do you think the number one most common triggering event or triggering thing would be amongst the people that you've worked with? And then I will share.
I would say stressful events,
Yeah.
or stressful periods of time. Maybe
Mm-hmm.
they move, maybe they start a new job, maybe they're planning a wedding.
Yeah.
I see stress as being very heavily tied into gut function and a SIBO
Huge.
root cause. I would say food poisoning events.
Mhm.
And then I'd also say antibiotics. So I'm
Yeah.
curious to hear what your two were.
Yeah. And it's curious because one is the same and one is a different one that you didn't mention.
Okay.
It's interesting because the antibiotics SIBO link, I think, is now getting explored. I agree. I think I ask people, I have a part of my questionnaire where I ask, like, how many rounds of antibiotics did you have in your childhood, in your
Yeah.
adulthood, like
Mm-hmm.
in the last, year or two? Stressful events also are in the top three that I've seen. Food poisoning is a big biggie that I see quite frequently. And then also acid suppression, like whether it be a proton pump inhibitor or something like Zantac. Usually, this is more associated with the proton pump inhibitors more than anything else. It's a big freaking deal.
Mm-hmm.
These drugs are not without consequences. No matter how lackadaisically they are prescribed, they have a lot of consequences. And they are a very common root cause of SIBO. But they didn't know. You trust the authorities in your life, you trust the doctors, and you just run with what they tell you. Um, but anyway, I think that getting off of these drugs in whatever capacity you can. Side note: neither of us are prescribers. I'm not a
Yeah.
prescriber. You're not a prescriber. So you need to work with your doctor or find somebody who can work with you on this.